Toxicity. In the social context, toxicity often describes behaviors, attitudes, or environments that are harmful, negative, or abusive. This can include verbal abuse, manipulation, bullying, harassment, or any other behavior that creates a hostile or unhealthy atmosphere. Toxicity can manifest in various forms, such as toxic relationships, toxic workplaces, or toxic online interactions. On today's episode of the Dangerous Woman podcast, we're back with Christie Ashbeck to discuss toxic masculinity, toxic femininity, and toxic individuality. Welcome to the Dangerous Women podcast, where the intersection of fierceness and femininity fuels empowerment. Our goal is to provide women with insights to unleash their power. Grounded in the 7 principles of self-confidence, we guide women to embrace their duality, delicate as a flower, yet powerful as a bomb. I'm your host, Colleen Conlon, inviting you to join me as we explore topics on health and wellness, empowering you to embody the essence of your dangerous woman. Welcome back, Christie. Thank you so much for being with us again. Can we just dive right in? Can you please tell us what is masculine and feminine toxicity?
So from my perspective and what I've been trained through relational life therapy is male toxicity would be kind of the term we call male patriarchy. So patriarchy is pretty much what we've lived under. It hasn't been spoken outwardly about. It's just kind of like the sea we swim in, where it's just assumed that men have a power over the female species. So that's called patriarchy. It's been around for a very long time, and it's something that the feminist movement has tried to shift from certain times. Where female toxicity comes into that is that when the feminist movement took off, women kind of embraced their masculine side and evolved to become more independent and be able to be productive in the world, not just stay home and raise children and be submissive. They literally embraced their masculine side, stood up, and the male toxicity part would be that they just got a little bit more controlling and up here. So they wanted to reestablish the better than, less than culture that we've been living in historically. When feminist movement wasn't enough, it slipped into what we called like a matriarchal system, where all of a sudden the females that took it to a toxic level wanted to have the dominance over the male species. So this female toxicity about we're better than they are, we don't need them, really, really took off like crazy in our culture and spread its influence over a lot of, people who had been oppressed for so long. They finally had a voice. And when they used it, it came out with a lot of anger.
Mm. And when we are just trying to observe this at different points in men, in women throughout history, like what are some of these qualities that we're specifically looking at in regards to toxic masculinity versus toxic femininity?
Yeah, so the toxic part would be the power over, as in we're better than you are, instead of the power with, which is we're relationally powerful together. The
And
toxic part is the part that's dysfunctional.
and are there different qualities other than it's having power over someone else?
It could be meanness, it could be entitlement, it could be abuse, it could be violence, control over other people, as if there was a right to be above that person.
Mm. And right before we got onto this call, we were actually talking about toxic femininity, and I had done a Google search to see what the like top characteristics of that are. And one of the main things that popped up was manipulation.
Hmm.
And when I think of just from like a fitness standpoint, regardless of your weight to strength ratio, the male species is stronger, is more powerful than the female in regards to a physical standpoint. So it makes sense to me that the way you overpower that isn't necessarily through the same means to an end. Using something like manipulation makes a lot of sense to have the upper hand in that type of a power play dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah. So manipulation comes from the lesser than perspective, and it goes back to patriarchy. With the male dominant culture and their historic entitlement to control the female species, um, women couldn't use their voice to get their needs met. And this is taught very early on in their early childhood. Little girls are taught to be, quiet, polite, submissive, and don't, yell and don't get angry. Whereas little boys are, they're expected to be roughhousing. They're expected to be loud. They're expected to be, angry even and controlling. And little girls are just expected to be quiet and submissive and good and not, ruffle anybody's feathers. So little girls lose their voice early on, and they don't really speak how they want to, because somebody's going to shoot them down and tell them that's not appropriate. You shouldn't be acting like that. You need to be, nobody's going to ever want to be with you if you're so controlling or if you're so angry all the time. So, our culture just kind of puts females in a place where they don't learn how to use their voice and speak up. And that's the patriarchal structure that we're discussing, how it's male dominance and women's submissiveness over here. So women needed to get their needs met somehow. So they resorted to what is called manipulation. And it's how they got their needs met without having to actually state directly what they need, because they knew that would get shot down. So they had to kind of go behind the scenes and figure out how they could get their needs met and their children's needs met without angering the male.
So all of this is being taught to us, whether we're aware of it or not, in early childhood.
Yeah, I thankfully the roles are changing, and so the modern family is a lot different. But we're talking about how it was, 50 years ago or even 20 years ago. It was more of this. You just didn't see little girls able to speak out and use their voices. We're getting there where we are now, but we're still living under that patriarchal culture, that system. And a lot of people don't talk about it. We don't want to admit it, but it's true. You can see it. There's male dominance out there still in many areas.
And would you say then, if we're looking at little girls and losing their voices resulting to manipulation, what is it with little boys and being told, like, you can't cry, you can't show emotion? How does that then show up in an adult man?
So that shows up an adult man as someone who is out of touch with their emotions, and they suppress the parts of themselves that they aren't supposed to have. So they suppress sadness, they suppress fear, they might even suppress happiness and joy, because that's not what little boys are supposed to do. You're supposed to be, productive and confident and even keeled and responsible. So they suppress a lot of those natural emotions. And when you suppress emotions long enough, you really disown a large part of who you are, and depression inevitably starts to slip in. So we have a large epidemic of male depression that we also don't talk about that much.
So how do we is there anything that we can do as an adult who's realizing, oh, I actually I can relate to exactly what Christy's saying. Maybe I'm an adult woman and I feel like I don't really I don't really have the ability to speak up and use my voice. Or maybe even, there's a woman listening to this right now, or there's a man listening to this right now, and there's the ability to relate to the depression as a man.
Mhm.
What do you do in this moment, recognizing, oh, I have that. I can relate to that. What do you do to fix it?
So it's you go to therapy, you kind of learn how what's going on in your relationship with a part of the patriarchy. It's like there's this belief that women, another thing that people don't talk about openly is that women by nature are protectors and nurturers, and they could be with a partner that is abusive and controlling, and there's a part of them that wants to protect that person and nurture it, and not hurt the feelings over there. They're always trying to make it better, so they don't have their voice. They don't say, I really don't like it when you yell and scream at me. I hope you don't do that anymore. Their automatic is to go under and try to work. It's kind of like manipulation. How can I make this angry man better around me and the children? So we'll organize a house so there's no noise. We'll make sure the kids don't yell while he's working. And all these behaviors is a subtle form of manipulation.
Does it work?
It's managing somebody else's behavior, and it's control. It's control on the other side. It's So I'll bring up my grid.
Yeah.
I think that might help illustrate this some more. So yeah, so let's look at the boundaryless side. The one up was a grandiose position. So that would be the partner who is controlling, who is entitled, who is feels like they're better than. The bottom side is where we see the shame-based person that is desperate. They do the manipulation. They try to figure out how to make this angry person or this toxic person healthy without rocking the boat too much. And it's controlling. This is a boundaryless behavior is all controlling. They're trying to control their angry partner so that they're not angry, while the angry partner is trying to control their shame-based partner so that they stay down in that one down position, submissive. So what flips is that there becomes anger. And when we talk about female toxicity and all of a sudden matriarchy, right, it's completely flipped, where women become very angry when they realize that they have been oppressed, and they find their voice. They don't just come up to the center of health, they go all the way up and become boundaryless and angry and controlling. And in the worst case scenario, could turn into violence.
Wow.
There we have the domestic violence and such, the meanness and the entitlement.
So even if you're acting out of a place of love, control sounds like it's still not the answer.
No, you can't ever control anything outside of yourself. Even though people do, they try, and that's the dependency. That's the codependency. Yeah, they try. They try to be enough for the person. They try to make them happy. They try, from the desperate one down position. And if you're from the toxic grandiose position up there, you order, you demand, you control. So the center of health is where you want to be.
And what happens if you are, so focused on, it's my responsibility to fix this person. I love this person. I want to fix them. And you just like you don't stop. What happens?
You might fall into depression because you're never going to be enough for that person to be any different than who they are.
What what is the fix for that person? If it's not me controlling, how does that person get help?
So in a relationship, they they learn how to use their voice, and they regulate their emotions while they're using their voice so that they're not going up into violence, and they're not dropping down into pity shame. They are stating what they need, what they would prefer. For instance, would you please go to counseling with me? This relationship is just really hard. I think we could be better. That's what you do. And that's healthy. When you flip into anger, retaliation, I'm going to get back at you. Look what you did. And now you're going to pay for it. Oh, that's just toxic. And it's that you're flipped better than the one upside.
Yikes.
Yeah.
So what what is toxic individuality?
So from what I feel, toxic individuality is where you literally feel like you can do it all on your own. You don't need anybody. You don't want to get too close to anybody. You want to have your freedom. You want to do your own thing. You don't have to want to worry about anybody else's, feelings or, how you interfere with their life. It's toxic because it's like the person in the room that is just breathing out, the bad energy, and everybody else around them has to be, receiving it. And it doesn't help anybody with being in a healthy space. So individuality doesn't do anything for your fellow beings, I guess, or your families, people around you, your coworkers, your people you want to be close to.
And this isn't to be confused with being authentically you and being you as an individual. There's a difference between those two things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's healthy to be you as an individual, and you need to be you as an individual so that you show up in the relationship as you and you're accepted as you. Absolutely. And that's healthy. The unhealthy is being walled off and feeling like you're better than somebody else and you don't need anybody.
In society, it seems like a lot of people are really pushing, like, well, I can do it on my own. I don't need help. Like, wa- watch me rise solo. Those are examples of what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Uh-huh. Yeah, and while like personal achievements are they're good for you. They give you a goal, something to reach for. If it becomes almost like that's your only like the only thing you need, the only thing you desire, the only thing that's going to fulfill you, it's not healthy because inevitably that is not going to exist anymore. If it's a performance that you're chasing or a something some amount of money or a career or a place you live, if that's what you're chasing, that's not going to always sustain you and fulfill you.
Hmm.
So you need to be able to be healthy without it as well.
So, in that case, what does healthy look like? What should we be chasing after?
A
Should we
healthy
even be
self.
chasing?
Okay. Right. Well, it's like we're all equal in the aspect that we all are worthy and we deserve to be here. And we may have skills and gifts that we have that other people don't have, but they don't make us any better than anybody else. It's just, something that we have. And at the same time, our flaws, which we all have, don't make us any less than anybody else. So healthy is just accepting yourself, all of it, your limitations, as well as the gifts that you have, and getting self-esteem from within instead of focusing on what I can achieve, what I can own, how people look at me for esteem out there.
Hmm. And does this all happen just because of society over the past few decades? Or does
It's
it?
our society. Yeah, our society kind of praises it. It's look what you've done all by yourself. That's amazing. And so there's that external drive of attention that these people get for where they're headed with their endeavors. And that's great until they can no longer perform at that level. And then they no longer get the praise and the attention. And they're left with wondering, where everybody went and who they are.
When you have a client like that that shows up in a therapy session, what's the first question you end up asking them?
So most of the people I see who end up in therapy are people that are from the one down, shame, based or not feeling worthy version. I don't see a lot of people from the one up grandiose because they feel good and they don't think there's anything wrong with them. So I don't see them here. So when I see people here individually from the shame base, they're usually 99.9% living or dealing with somebody in their life that is oppressing them, and they don't know how to change this other person's behavior. It might be even that they're being abused emotionally or physically, psychologically, and they come to therapy to learn how to deal with the other person. I can't help with that though, because obviously the other person isn't here.
Hmm.
So what I do is I try to help them build their strengths and their self-esteem from within themselves so that they can use their voice and stand up and create, a reality that they want to have. I teach them healthy boundaries.
If you were to have one of those people walk in, though, the person who is the lone wolf, the individual, they've been chasing everything, and then it's like, now what? What's the first question you would ask them if you met that person right now?
Yeah, so I would ask them who they are, and undoubtedly they would tell me, well, I'm a developer and I have, contracts all over the country. And did you see the car I drove up in here? They start telling me right away the things that they have, and truthfully, these people are walled off. They don't want me to see who they really are. So it's all very surfacey. Oh, and by the way, I have, these people in my life, they all think I'm amazing. And they told me I don't know why you're here. You don't need therapy. You're so smart. I mean, these people are living behind a wall of delusion. So I am very limited in what I can say because they're not ready to see what their life would be like if all of those things fell away from them. If they lost the attention from their friends, if they lost the contracts, if they couldn't afford the car, they don't even believe that could ever happen.
So, is it possible that these people who end up this way, I kind of hate saying like they're a lost cause, but it kind of sounds like they are a lost cause in the sense that like they're not going to recognize it. The people around them, even if they're doing their best to help bring the awareness to them, they might think they're just like so, you know, one upped that no, of course I don't need help.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything we can do to
No.
help them? No.
Well, the part that what the struggle is that when they're in that grandiose, look how great I am, I'm so much better than you perspective, they they lack insight and they don't really care how their behavior is affecting other people because they feel good. And if somebody says they have a problem with how they're acting, well then they would assume that it's their problem. It's somebody else's problem. It feels good to be better than. It feels good to know that you're the best thing out there. And why would you want to make that change? You wouldn't. There's nobody has any leverage to force a change because literally it feels good to be better. It's an addictive state.
I mean, it does sound pretty amazing to be able to think that way. Like nothing can top you, but we know in reality that's not healthy. That's not a good place to be striving for. So, what do we do for ourselves if that's who if that's somebody who's in our life and it's like not feeling good to have that kind of attitude around us?
Right. So get yourself into some counseling, get into a group perhaps that is an emotional support group. You have to know that you can't do anything for those people. The only time I'd see those people truthfully, the grandiose people in therapy is if in couples. Sometimes one partner that's been in the one down position and hasn't used their voice, eventually they get really tired of it and they realize maybe for the sake of the children that they need to do something different. And so they'll tell this person that you need to go to therapy or I'm getting a divorce.
What would life be like if you could get that toned look? You could have physical superhuman strength by training with just 2 kettlebells at home? What would happen if you were on a program that strengthens self-awareness and courage so that you can develop a deeper connection and trust to self? What about this? What if you could be in a community with other women where you are encouraged to be assertive and resilient to build mental and physical strength? If you're waiting to hear what the offer is, this is it. Swing to Snatch, a 13-week kettlebell intensive, is my signature course that empowers women to get started with kettlebells. Work with me live in a virtual container guaranteed to grant you kettlebell queen status. To learn more, visit www.colleenconlon.com.
Well, then they come into therapy so that they can support the unhappy partner. But even then, it can be a hard road to try to get them to understand the consequences that their behavior has put on the relationship, because they will just keep blaming the other partner for what they're doing. They lack insight. They lack empathy. They have impaired judgment. Sometimes, we're talking like a severe narcissism. It's very hard to treat. And the best that you could do, I should say, I have been able to do with the true narcissist, is that get them to at least be less offensive to other people. And that's it. I can't change how great they feel about themselves, how they don't understand other people, but I can at least, get them to be less offensive. And that's about it. As far as coming back down into a healthy place where they can be relational and connected and intimate with somebody, I don't have that. It's very hard.
And then what about toxic individuality, not necessarily with somebody who is in an active relationship, but they just keep putting this heavy emphasis on themselves and I don't need other people. I'm doing great on my own. Why do I need to make an effort to be more connected with other people? What do you ask that person if they're like really putting their foot down, like, no, this works for me?
Yeah. So I just say, best of luck with that. Literally, because they are so steadfast in their position and they are walled off. That's the biggest thing, is they are walled off. They have a wall of money around them, a wall of influential friends, a wall of fans that adore them, a wall, all of this here. And they're so out of touch with themselves that I can't get through the wall. The only, if the wall were to fall down all at once, you lose everything and you hit rock bottom and you realize, oh, I'm not all that I thought I was. So there might be some hope there. And we don't see that happen very much though.
You said something very specific on the first call you did on the Dangerous Woman podcast, talking about how we are herd people. Can
Yes.
you talk about that again? Because anybody
Yeah.
who's listening to this, it might actually feel themselves kind of being that toxic individual. I think this is something that needs to be heard right now.
Okay. So we are a herd species. We're a social species. We do better in community. We are similar to any herd species that you would see. Horses. I work with horses a lot, so I can see a lot of our the way we operate, like neurobiologically, our trauma triggers, our how we regulate our emotions. It's all based off of the herd we run with. We're as safe as the people we're with. What happens is that I guess with toxic individuality is that they feel like they're safe all by themselves and they literally don't need anybody and they're disconnected. Whereas other people who want to be relational in a circle of health, they still feel the emotions of the people around them and they can't figure out how to get to this one that seems disconnected and pulling away from them. In a herd mentality with horses, that would, if you're driven out of the herd, you're going to die. You're not going to survive. And that's really from our biological aspect. Before we were able to survive, on our own with modern conveniences that we have now, we would have died as well out on our own, kicked out of the herd. There's no way you would have made it.
Hmm.
So there's a part of us that still has that innate wisdom in it, and knows that if I am in isolation, I am not safe. I need around me. I need people around me. These are the people that they end up with these people that seem infuriatingly an island, and they
Hmm.
can't get to them, and they feel disconnected, and there's no way they can connect to that person.
Is there ever a time where it's actually healthier to be on your own? Like when you're talking about, you brought up the narcissist, or looking on that sheet when people are starting to get violent.
Mhm.
Is it better to be in a relationship? And we're not just talking necessarily about romantic relationships. Maybe this is like a different relationship uh, within family or friends or work. I don't know. I'm asking you that right now, Christy.
Yeah.
But is there a time where it makes more sense to be on your own? Ideally, we want to be in a healthy spot with others, or like, okay, in my head, I'm thinking I always want to be in a healthy spot with other people. If I can't be there, I want to be healthy and alone. And under that would be I'm with people, but they're kind of mean and they don't make me feel very good about myself. Like, what is the hierarchy of all of that? Because is it possible that we're all just like always in healthy relationship, or we can all achieve that whenever we want?
We No, it would be nice if we could, because that's how we're wired, is to get along and help each other. But this individuality that our culture thrives on, about look at how amazing I am, I don't need anybody, it disconnects us from that. The healthiest state, and research has proven this time and time again, is in a relationship where you get nurturing, you get love, you get validation, you get support. That's the most optimum place to be. Your nervous system runs on a good, level. In your health, you can thrive in there. Living in a relationship where you're not getting your needs met, you're getting abused, and abuse can be even, something that devoid the relationship, is there's no nurturing in the relationship at all. And that could be a symptom of, the psychological abuse. But so that's not a healthy place to be, because you are not getting your needs met, and inevitably you're disconnected from that person. Then the next healthy place would be, underneath a healthy relationship, is to be by yourself and be healthy and take care of yourself and your own needs. But there's individual therapy is done a little bit of a discredit, I think, to us, in that it has given like an individual the belief that they can do it all by themselves, and they don't need these people in their lives, and they're better off without them, and you should just do this, and you shut the door and never look back, and set your boundaries so that you never, see them again. It doesn't really do a service, because that is not, science shows that's not our healthiest state. Our healthiest state is in relationship with other people. So yeah, it's with other people. We need to be connected. We
And
regulate emotions from those around us.
and I would imagine if you are in a tough situation where, you're surrounded with any of these toxic characteristics, whether it be about the individual, the feminine, the masculine, if you were just in a toxic environment, the answer isn't necessarily just leave. Maybe certain situations, like the easiest thing to do is leave. But if you want to be in these relationships with other people who have these qualities, it's possible to go to therapy and figure out an action plan so that maybe things can change and you don't just have to leave the herd. Is that right?
Yeah, that would be the best. You would try that first for sure. Yeah. And that would be learning healthy boundaries, not taking things personally, creating distance when you are getting abused, speaking up and using your voice to set a boundary when you need to tell somebody you're not going to tolerate that. That would be the best case scenario. Yet there are people that they don't want to be told what to do. They don't want a boundary. They don't want anybody to tell them, hey, I really don't appreciate how you speak that way to me. They don't want to receive that feedback because they're walled off, right? And so they push against it. So the best case scenario for that person would be after trying to leave the herd, the group that they're with.
How many times should somebody try before leaving the herd?
Good question. It depends on the level of abuse. If it's subtle in the form of, once in a while there's criticisms, maybe once or twice a month when somebody's, very angry. Yeah, okay, you can stay in that and work on that. But if you're getting abused emotionally and or physically, sexually on a consistent basis, get out now, right now. Don't stand around to negotiate. Easier said than done, right? Because like I said earlier, in a male dominant culture, and they are abusive towards the female, but the female feels like they have to take care of that fragile ego of the male, and they stay there and they hope for the best. They minimize the abuse. They make excuses and justify his poor behavior. So they get stuck and they don't leave, and it's really hard to get them to leave. So they stay.
Until
They're miserable, and they life goes on, and they get to the last stages of life, and they, you hit the last stage of life is, are you going to leave this earth with a sense of integrity or despair? So unfortunately, if you've not done anything to keep yourself safe and you've been abused your entire life, and all the manipulation tactics you use to try to turn this around so that your partner becomes a better human being to you fail, it's despair.
Hmm.
You don't get a do-over.
I know I asked you this question at one point during the amount of time we've known each other, that you do have a lot of clients who are at the later stages in their life. When you are talking with somebody who is near death and they look back on their life and they wish they could change something, is this one of those things that actually comes up? Like, I wish I didn't stay around the toxic person, or I wish I said something to the toxic person that was in my life?
It sadly does come up. Absolutely. Yeah, I wish I could have seen these people 30 years prior and worked through their codependent issues so that they would know that they cannot control this other person who is committed to being abusive and angry. They don't have superpowers. There's nothing they could have done. And then they realize that later. And yeah, sometimes sadly it's too late. You've wrecked your health. You're not well. Your body has not been able to thrive under that constant oppression and toxicity. So you're sick. Sorry. It is. It's a sad place to be.
But it's reality. It sounds like for a
Absolutely,
lot of
it's
people.
reality. It is reality for a lot of people. And I think it's changing in that women, once again, with the feminist movement, they kind of stepped up and said, I'm not going to take that anymore. I'm going to do something for myself and leave this toxic, partner over here and do my own thing. And that's fine. And eventually they find another person who is more on their level, who they can connect with in a healthy way. Or they might shoot up into anger and become the abuser and start, abusing other people the way they had been treated. And then that becomes I don't need anybody. I'm better than you. You look what you did. I'm never going to do this again. That sort of, frame.
Mm. It sounds like this can all just like ripple off into so many different situations. It sounds
Yeah,
really messy.
it's messy. Yeah, and nobody talks about it. That's the problem. We see these things as a part of our normal, life. These toxic relationships, these codependent relationships. It's like the American power couple.
Can you give a brief description over there was a show I know you have like a very strong feelings towards, which then made me think about a conversation I had with Tim around the characters in Twilight, the characters in 50 Shades of Grey. I want to say it's Yellowstone that you
Oh,
were referring to. And it's these people, and we look at
oh,
these
goodness.
relationships like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. There's something sexy about this. There's something I want, but it's toxic.
Yes. So Beth is horrible borderline personality disorder on the extreme. Okay, can't blame her. We all know her childhood. Her mom, what fell off the horse and died, blamed it on her. Did get through a few episodes. And so yeah, so Beth is borderline, can't control her emotions. She's very impulsive. And her power partner is Brick or Rip, something like that. Classic codependent. I'm going to take care of her. I'm going to try to, build her up. I'm going to understand her. I'm going to protect her. So it's kind of like the flip where Beth is up here and Rip or Brick, whatever his name is down here. It's a codependent relationship. It's very unhealthy. And I have seen a lot of mostly females tell me that they want somebody just like him, somebody who will put up with their poor behavior and their impulsivity and their inability to manage their emotions and on and on and on. And it's no,
Is that helping anyone?
no, it's not. It's becomes it's like the female toxicity. It's like I want to be that person who's out of control and angry and destructive and blows things up. And I want to do that because and I want to find a partner who will understand, my shadows and my demons and love me anyway. No, it's not healthy.
What should we be striving for when we are, and maybe this is a whole other podcast episode, but when we are trying to bring people into our lives, what are the qualities? And I think you said a lot of them before, so this is really just reiterating, but you said nurturing, you said supportive. What else are we looking for when we're bringing people into our the bubble that is us?
Yeah. So we want to be with people who aren't judgy and critical, who don't, fixate on our flaws, or somebody who's on an equal level, who knows that they're not better than or less than, that they're not perfect, either. Somebody who is validating and doesn't try to fix you or change you. And with that, if you're going to find somebody like that, it's really important to be who you are and not pretend to be somebody who you're not. Because if you're pretending to be somebody you're not, you're going to attract people in your life that don't fit there,
Mm.
and it's never going to work. So finding your true authentic self as an individual is absolutely healthy so that you can be with the right people who appreciate that.
How do you do that?
So that's a whole thing. A lot of therapy. You gotta, yeah, figure out who you were before somebody told you who you're supposed to be. Find out your strengths, the gifts that you had before somebody told you they were inappropriate or they weren't, what you're supposed to be doing, or you weren't supposed to be looking like that before anybody shamed you, I guess, for being who you were. Because shame coming down at an early age, it just shuts everything growth. It shuts down your individual growth to where you become a role. You do what people expect you to do instead of, who you are.
Mm. It sounds like some inner child work. Is that right?
Yep. Absolutely. And I see so many people, they don't know who they are. And that's what happens when you get all of your esteem from these external, things. Like some people get all their esteem because they're such a great mother and they do so much for their children and they get so much praise for that. Well, then the children move away and the mother goes a huge esteem crash because now they feel like they're useless. They don't have a role. They don't have a purpose. They have nothing. They literally don't even know who they are without their role of a mother.
And the answer is get into therapy.
It would be helpful, yes, to get into therapy who understands the developmental life cycles and relationships. It's all about relationships. Everybody who comes in for individual therapy is talking about somebody they're trying to be in a relationship with and
Mm.
it's not working.
Mm.
So it's about relationships.
As we get ready to wrap up this episode, Christy, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share with anyone in regards to toxic masculinity, femininity, or individuality?
I would just say stay in the middle of all things. You're no better than or less than anybody else. And just be true to yourself. Don't throw yourself at other people and demand they accept you as you are. Use a containing boundary that, this is what I want to share. This is what I want to express. I can do this with kindness. I don't have to be mean and critical and rude. Just take it down a notch. Or if you're in the shame-based position, bring yourself up a notch. You're worthy too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Dangerous Women podcast. If you had any groundbreaking takeaways from today's episode, please tag us on social at the Dangerous Women podcast. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe below.